I went through about 14 years ago this month. It was back in 2005. It wasn't so much my personal story, but that of my father. And I was intertwined in that story as I walked with him, as did the rest of my family, as he went through his own prostate cancer story. And I wanted to share that. I've actually talked about this previously years ago on radio and so on. And I try to get this message out to as many people as I can, because it is something that's very important. And the key point here that I will keep coming back to is that it's really about understanding and being aware that every one of us have choices. Regardless of what anybody else can tell you, whether it's your doctor or medical community, or whether it's just a so-called common sense or common knowledge, we all have a brain, and we can all use it to research and educate ourselves and to make up our own decisions as to how we want to move forward and make choices that ultimately impact us in a very deep and meaningful way. So back in 2005, my father quite accidentally found out that he had prostate cancer. And I say accidentally because the way that it happened was a little bit unique. In his profession, he's retired now, but he was an airline captain, and he's mandated by federal law to have a full physical examination every 6 months. And part of that physical examination is they do your blood work. And for anybody here who's had blood work done, and that probably is everybody, I'm thinking, if you look on the form, there's a whole list of all kinds of things that they can test for. And the doctor kind of decides what they're going to check for. And there's the usual things that they check off, and off it goes. But there's a lot of empty boxes that the doctor doesn't check off. And one of those values, and guys, listen when I say this one, it's one called your PSA level. And the PSA level is very important. And normally, the doctors don't check that box. They don't look for that in the blood work. And the reason why is because it costs the healthcare industry a whopping $14 to do that test. And they're trying to save money, just like anybody else is. So for some reason, we think it might have been an accident, whatever the case was, the doctor miraculously decided to check off that box. And shortly after the examination, the test came back, the doctor said, we need to redo your blood test because your PSA level is too high. Well, nobody in our family knew what that meant. We just thought, okay, well, there's some value that's a little bit too high, off he goes, he gets another test. They say, okay, we're going to have to do a biopsy because we reconfirmed that that value is a little bit too high. Now, a PSA number basically is an indicator that you may have prostate cancer. It doesn't mean you have it, it just means you may have it. So, of course, we're starting to worry a little bit now. The biopsy comes back. Sure enough, there's cancerous cells. So now we're really starting to worry. None of us know what a prostate is. We don't know what PSA is. There's all this new terminology. But what we did understand was the word cancer. And of course, that's a very scary word to hear. So of course, in my mind, I'm thinking of all these worst case scenarios. But being the family that we are, everybody jumped into action and we started to do some research. Now this was back in 2005, so the internet wasn't quite the same as it is today, but there was still a lot of information out there. And we were lucky enough to find out that there are actually a lot of different treatments available. Because here's the point that I found to be a little bit upsetting back then. The medical community, they don't tell you the whole story. And the reason why, a lot of times, is because they don't want to freak you out. They don't want you to be scared or panic or avoid a treatment that could ultimately save your life because you're scared of the treatment. But I feel sometimes it really should be our decision as to whether or not we want to hear that story or not and understand what's going on with our own bodies. So the way that the doctor explained it, he says, oh, Mr. Kramer, don't worry about that. This is very routine. Men get prostate cancer all the time. And as a quick little side note, yes, that's true. Any man who has a prostate, which is all of us, you will get cancer in your prostate. The thing is, it's a very slow-growing cancer, and we usually die of old age or something else long before the prostate cancer would take us. But if it is detected, it does need to be removed, because if not, it can spread to the rest of the body. So he says we have a very simple procedure. It's like a day surgery. You go in, we cut out the cancerous part from your prostate, you go home, you're fine. Not 100% true. What happens is, not in every guy, but in most guys, two big things that they don't tell you. The first one is erectile dysfunction. Okay, it's not deadly, you can survive, but on an emotional level and on a psychological level, that can be quite devastating, especially if you don't know ahead of time that that's what's coming down the road. The other one is bladder control. So imagine you go through this so-called normal procedure, you wake up the next morning, and all of a sudden you realize quite quickly that you have no bladder control, and for the rest of your life, you have to have a plastic bag taped to your hip, and that's now your external bladder. Again, would be a little bit upsetting, I would think. So as a family, we decided, you know what, this is not acceptable. We've got to find something else. So we did a lot of research. We learned a lot about this whole topic. And what we found was that, yes, there are a lot of other options. Now, the doctor would not tell us about them. And if we asked, they would say, no, we can only recommend this one procedure. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's take a look at all of these. So if you're looking at that, you might see that there's ways that they can go in and they can freeze the cancerous cells, they can burn them out. There's all kinds of other treatments available, each with varying degrees of success rates and so on. But what we came across was something that I consider to be actually quite miraculous, and it's called proton radiation therapy. Who here has heard about that? A few of you. Okay. My goal is to get a few more hands up in the air next time you hear about it. So, proton radiation therapy. Now here the scary word is not cancer, but now it's radiation. Oh my God. We all have those stories that we've heard about, right? We all have family, friends who have gone through some kind of cancer treatment perhaps, chemotherapy and all of that. The nice thing with proton therapy is there's absolutely zero side effects. Nothing. Nothing at all. They don't cut into you. It's non-invasive. There's no bruising or swelling or anything like that. Your hair doesn't fall out. You don't get nauseous and sick. Your immune system doesn't go down. It's a fantastic therapy. And I wish I had more time because I'd love to explain how it all works and the science behind it because it's quite fascinating. But at the time, there was only one place in the entire world that did this. And this was down in Southern California, just east of Los Angeles, in a place called Loma Linda. And basically what happens is my dad packed up his stuff, went down there and moved down there for 3 months because it's a 3-month treatment. And what he would do is he would go in once a day for about an hour. And for that hour, he would have his treatment, and then he'd have the rest of the day free. So it was like an extended vacation. We like to look at the positive things of life. So my dad said, hey, you know what? I'm down here for 3 months. Why don't you come down and spend some time with me? Before I knew it, I was in California. It was my first time. It was great. Palm trees, and we went down to San Diego and LA and Hollywood and did a lot of traveling and had a lot of fun and got some real good bonding time. And I think for him especially, it was really, really good because, let's face it, he was going through a very difficult time. We don't know, is this going to work? And I got a chance to tour the facility, which is a fantastic facility. I'm telling you, this is like walking into NASA Control Center. There's like guys in white lab coats. Like, there's one patient in the room, in this huge room, and there's equipment everywhere. There's like about 30 guys walking around in lab coats and checking everything off and making sure. And then when they've got it all ready, they spend 59 minutes and about 59 seconds getting it all set up. Then they're all confirmed, yep, we're all ready. The one guy pushes the button and goes, okay, you can go. It's quite simple. The caveat to this is that it is unfortunately a very expensive surgery. So if OHIP doesn't cover the $14 PSA level, they're not going to cover this cost either, unfortunately. So this was a cost that my dad had to take on unto himself. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, look at it. You've worked hard, you've saved your money. I said, if you're going to spend it on anything, spend it on being able to stick around for a little bit. I don't need your inheritance, I'd rather have you sticking around. That's much more valuable to me. So to make a long story short, here we are, 14 years later to the month. It was November of 2005 when my dad went through this treatment. And the cancer is completely gone. It was gone right away. He's a wonderful cancer survivor. He's living life to the fullest. We were all fearful at the time that it might have been the end, but instead it was the beginning, and we've had a great life ever since. I just wanted to make sure that I get this message out again to as many people as possible, because if we had just stopped and listened to the healthcare system, his life would have looked a lot different. We decided to buck the trends. And the one note I'll leave you with is when we were down there, they had this wonderful thing every Wednesday evening where they had everybody who was in treatment, and I think there were about 300 guys in the room. And they had open mic. And if you wanted to say something, you put up your hand, and they gave you the mic, and you could stand up there and talk for a couple minutes. And almost every single guy, his main story was about how his doctor told him, no, don't do this proton therapy thing. It's experimental, it's not going to work. You should do the tried and true system. And of course, we all tend to go by what our doctors say, what our professionals say. But again, remember, we all have a brain, we all have a head. Think for yourselves. Do the research, become educated, and live a long and happy life. Thank you.